Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Gamer, and we are finally getting to the videos for Vampire the Masquerade. I apologize for taking so long. It's been a really busy week for me. If you want to see any of what I've been going on, please watch some of the other videos I've posted this week. I've talked about everything enough, and I just kind of want to get this done and out of the way, but please don't take that as a sign that Vampire wasn't a good game. In fact, Vampire's a great game. I will be posting soon the player interviews, and honestly, a lot of them were very highly rated for how much they liked Vampire the Masquerade. But this video is more about getting started and what you need to know. The biggest thing with Vampire the Masquerade is to understand what kind of game it actually is about. Vampire the Masquerade is a game about playing a bunch of vampires who are disguising what they are to the rest of the world. The Masquerade is literally a series of laws that prevent humanity from discovering the vampires. Because if they do, it will probably be the end for vampires everywhere. Granted, there's some examples where that might not be the case, but that's the general premise of the Masquerade. And a lot of vampire culture is very hierarchy based. It's about who you know, what you know, and how old your blood is in many, many ways. And thus, Vampire is mostly a game of social intrigue. There are combat elements, sure. There are things that vampires can do to get around certain situations. They can have some high action scenes. And I have heard of plenty of people who play Vampire the Masquerade as more or less a combat-driven experience, and that's not wrong. But I feel like Vampire especially really thrives when you're getting into the culture of vampires. Your game should be no more than 20% combat. Most sessions probably not even having any combat in them. It's just a thing where the vampire, lore, and that's another thing as well, the lore. Vampire the Masquerade is run best when you understand the game. And so if your GM is new to the game system, you might have a bit of a different experience if in comparison, they are more knowledgeable on the game system. And everyone's got to start somewhere. So don't hold it against them. Just understand that the more you understand about Vampire, its culture, and the narrative that it's driving, the better the game will be. But let's talk more about what you can do as a GM or as a player to get started. Vampire the Masquerade has some pretty generally easy character creation. The hardest part is honestly just making choices. Now, it is a White Wolf game. So White Wolf games are designed with the principle that the more dice you throw, the more of a success you'll gain. The more successes you get on the dice, the better the result for whatever check you're making. Now, in Vampire the Masquerade, I do believe a check of 6 or higher might be, I believe it's 6 or higher. I can double check here real quick. So yes, it is every roll of 6 to 9 is a success, and a 10 is a critical success. Now, critical success only work if you roll at least 2, and each pair generates double the number of successes. So for an example, if you roll 3 dice on a check, 1 is a critical success and the other are 2 normal successes, that is still 3 successes. But if 2 of them are critical successes, then that's 5 successes, because each one of those 2 critical successes count as 2 successes as long as they're paired up. It's a little complicated. It'll make more sense the more you play the game, but this does mean that the more dice you roll, the better you will be at the game. So really early on, you're going to pick out what your main attribute points are going to go to. And your game is, and it may be different for each game, but predominantly each game, you're going to have a number of attribute points in each section of your stats. And the attributes are paired with skills. Skills are essentially more along the lines of like your character's athletic ability, their ability to brawl, their knowledge in science, all that kind of stuff. And you pair one skill with one attribute to get the total number of dice you roll plus hunger dice. That's not something we're going to get into this video, but you know, there's some extra systems in Vampire. All you need to know as a player is that if you want to be good at something, you want to pair up good attributes with good skills that are often used together. Obviously, things like strength and dexterity are used with brawling, as well as knowledge and intelligence-based skills are paired with intelligence. There are all kinds of different pairings, and there might be a variety of situations where unique pairings are done. For instance, if you're trying to stealth by, or if you're trying to avoid being noticed by holding perfectly still, that would be something that'd use stamina plus stealth rather than your standard dexterity plus stealth. There are a wide variety of different ways that the skills can come together. The best you can do is decide on what role your character wants to play. And speaking on roles specifically, the role you want to perform in your party, I mean, Vampire has a lot of good crossover. Most vampires are pretty solitary creatures in general, so they have a wide number of skills, but obviously your party will have more success if they're further differentiated by what skills they cover. Obviously, there are kind of roles for playing an intelligence-based character. You have good, intelligence. Maybe you have good wits as well. You have a lot of knowledge-based skills. There are fighter characters that have good strength, stamina, dexterity, and really good brawling or gun handling skills. And then there's good face characters where you're using a lot of things like let me double check. Yes, so it's going to be, face characters are going to have high composure, high charisma. They're not shaken easily in a situation. Manipulation, if you plan on lying a lot or you plan on, disguising your motives. There's all kinds of really good attributes. And honestly, characters that are focused on one style of attribute, whether it's the physical, mental, or social, is very good. But of course, all vampires should have some capabilities one way or another. So consider what you're doing. Talk with your co-players as well. Vampire is a game that works best when everyone is working together, but the narrative is juicier when everyone is kind of doing their own thing as well. So just some things to consider. And when it actually comes to working together as a group, there is something called the relationship map. The relationship map is made at the beginning of the game and is kind of catered to or worked on through the rest of the story. It's where you make your characters' connections with each other as well as NPCs. It gets really messy as the game goes on, but it's a lot of fun. You essentially make a graph. You put your names on each corner of the graph, depending on how many players you have, and then between those lines, you connect the points, and you say what each character thinks about the other character, as well as what they think about various other vampires or humans in their life. This graph in particular is very important because a lot of what makes Vampire good is the social intrigue. This map will give the GM a lot of ideas on what kind of narratives to spin, and will kind of create a sense of connection with more than just your party. Obviously, there's your party connections, and most games don't even start with party connections. That's what makes Vampire really cool. But you also have NPCs in your life that are connected, and that's not found in most tabletop. So it's something you really want to consider and look at. Once you kind of get a general idea for your character and you've picked an appropriate number of attributes and skills that fit the character style you want, next is to pick the clans. Now, your clans are very important. Very, very important. There's probably not a single decision more important to your vampire than what clan you pick. Do your research, look into them. Each clan has their own curse affiliated with them. Each clan has their own form of how they do their hierarchy, what kind of actions they take, what kind of feeding habits they may have, and also what action or what access to disciplines they start out with and do better with. The disciplines are essentially the power categories for each of the vampire clans, and each one gets 3 with some overlap with some of the other clans as well. So it's very, very important that you kind of look at what kind of style of play you want to do. You pick a clan that really jives with your character's idea and that has disciplines that really focus in on what you want your character to accomplish. Obviously, something like Aventru are really good social characters because they get the compel, I believe, discipline, or the dominance, I believe, discipline, where they get the ability to compel humans easily, and sometimes other kindred. And I keep saying vampires. Technically, it's kindred. Sorry, it's been a really busy week, and I've already forgotten like everything I learned in the game system, so you'll have to forgive me. But once you pick the clan, then you're gonna pick the feeding habits of your particular kindred. Now, the kindred feeding habit or predator types are pretty straightforward. They're just what you do. Do you prefer to feed on people in their sleep? Do you go to blood banks to get blood? There's all kinds of different kinds of feeding habits. And not only that, but your feeding habits will make for some story moments. Maybe you desperately need to feed and you have to get somewhere where you can get access to blood quickly, but you have a preference in the style that you have to do it. This is very, very important. Once you kind of get everything that makes your character a kindred down, for the player perspective, once you get everything that you make about your kindred down, then you have your convictions, and your convictions and touchstones are really important. A big part of the Vampire the Masquerade game is that they are struggling with the cursed beast that is the vampire and with their humanity that is inevitably going to wane over time. Your convictions are the morals that you've maintained since turning, and your touchstones are human lives that keep you connected to humanity in some form. Maybe it's a descendant of someone you knew before, or it was a child you had saved in a prior, event. These are really important. These will also go on your relationship map, and these will be the core of some of your personal character arcs. So please take these into consideration and make it so that these individuals are legitimately important to your character, and their convictions are very much a part of how they monitor themselves, how they keep and act, and the kind of rules they follow, because these are all the really, really good narrative bits that comes from running a kindred in the Vampire the Masquerade. It makes your story more flavorful, it gives you intrigue, it gives you narrative, it gives you conflict. It's everything. Then the last part kind of comes up to your GM, because your GM is going to dictate what kind of game that you're going to be running. Now, one thing for the GMs out there who may or may not be watching this video, it's very, very important that you decide the generation that your kindred will be in, their coterie, or at the very least, what style. So, obviously, one of the more common if you're getting into the game for the first time, is the childer kind of age group. They've been turned either very, very recently or within the last 15 years. I would recommend making your kindred all level, generation 12 or 13. This makes them, if they're any later than 13, they are thin bloods, and it's really, really rough for them. They're not quite full kindred. There's a lot of rules about that. For your first game, don't do that. If anything, make them 13th or 12th generation, newly formed kindred, and then you can get into the blood potency and all that kind of stuff. A lot of these are rules I'm not going to go into in this video, but for setting it up, this is the way I would do it. You'd either make them childer or childre, which are just newly formed, getting their first steps into the nighttime life of being a kindred, or neonates. And neonates is for kindred who are a little bit more experienced. They start with some additional experience they can use to buy skills, disciplines, whatever. And not only that, but they've essentially been around for somewhere in the last 100 years, give or take. from like the 1940s to present day. Oftentimes they're somewhere in the range of like in their 50s, 60s, even 70s as far as how long they've been a kindred. This allows you to go deeper into that kind of kindred mentality where they are experienced, they know the way things go, they can hold themselves with some level of dignity and pride for how long they've managed to keep going, and they have a much deeper connection to the kindred societies as a whole. So both are very good games. Children are probably the best I'd recommend for a new game, but Neonates are for those who really, really, really want to get into the role play of what it is to be an actual kindred who has experienced the Masquerade and works for or against the Camarilla. So, with all this in mind, you pick a coterie for your group and you get going. The coteries are essentially like the base of what kind of campaign you're looking at. Some coteries are like you're playing Watchmen, you're keeping the city safe from outside forces, or the Vime, which is the more like secret police style of the kindred. There's all kinds of different coteries to do all kinds of different things, and overall the game is very, very interesting and very, very deep and complex. I absolutely love Vampire the Masquerade, and I think it's a great game for anyone who really wants to get into the role-playing side, who has a much heavier narrative leaning than other kinds of players. Obviously, this is not going to be dungeon crawling like you would in D&D or Pathfinder. This is going to be a much more narrative, social intrigue style game, but your players will start out feeling superior. A human stands no chance against a kindred in most situations and are oftentimes completely victim to their powers. This is great. It makes your players really feel powerful, makes them feel like true kindred of the night. And it's a great time overall. If you want something to get past the normal humdrum of what tabletop gaming is for the most part, you know, we're talking D&D, then this is the game for you 100%. This is, I think, the second biggest game as far as tabletop games are concerned when it comes to just the pure enjoyment and how well the system is done outside of D&D and Pathfinder. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end this video. I hope you all enjoyed. I had to look some things up. I had to refresh myself on some of the minor rules and everything like that. I hope this gave you some information on what you would like. Feel free to ask questions in the comments down below. If you have any further questions on the system, I can always look things up. And again, I played a couple times, so I know at least some little bits about it. And this is, of course, overall our first impressions on the game system. And I gotta say, I'm very impressed. And if you liked this video, please like it so that it shows up in the algorithm for other people who might want to see it. Subscribe to let the algorithm know that I'm doing the job well and you want to see more of our content. And if you want to join our community and see all the amazing things that we're currently in the works that are coming up for the channel very soon, please either follow me on Twitter or join our Discord where we talk about all things tabletop. I also recruit there for all of my games, so if you want to play with me and my friends, that's the place to be. And of course, again, we talk all things tabletop. So even we got a very flourishing Warhammer 40k group in there. So it's overall really good, and I'm very, very excited about some of the future projects we have going on. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. Thank you all so much for being here. Good luck with your games, leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.